I still remember the anticipation buzzing in my chest as I stepped into that upscale restaurant. The warm glow of dim lights, the hum of quiet conversations, the soft clinking of glasses. It felt like the perfect setting for what was supposed to be a magical first date. I had spent extra time on my outfit, wanting to make a good impression. And why wouldn't I? Henry had seemed charming over text. Witty, confident, even a little flirtatious in a way that made me think he was the kind of man who knew exactly what he wanted. He had been the one to suggest the restaurant, calling it his favorite spot, so I expected him to be waiting when I arrived. But as I scanned the tables, he was nowhere to be seen. The host approached me with a polite smile. "Are you waiting for someone?" "Yes, Henry," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the first flicker of irritation. "Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to appreciate each and every one of you. Your support means the world and helps keep this community growing. If you enjoy thought-provoking content, consider subscribing. It's free and makes a big difference. Now let's begin." The host nodded, checked his list, and then gestured toward a corner table. He called ahead. Said he'd be a few minutes late but asked for this table specifically. I swallowed the irritation and smiled. A few minutes wasn't a big deal. Maybe traffic had been bad. Maybe he was parking. Maybe, well, I didn't want to overthink it. So I took my seat, ordered a glass of wine, and scrolled through my phone while waiting. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. When he finally walked in, there was no hurried apology, no sheepish grin. Just an easy, confident stride as if he owned the place. Henry was tall, well-dressed, and had a smirk that lingered on his lips as if he found everything amusing. "Abigail, right?" he said as he slid into the seat across from me. "Sorry I'm late. I lost track of time at the gym." I blinked. No apology. No acknowledgement of how long I had been sitting there. Just a casual excuse, as if making a woman wait for nearly half an hour was normal. Still, I smiled, determined not to let the evening be ruined by a rough start. "I hope you had a good workout." He grinned. "Always. You don't get a body like this by slacking, you know?" He leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms as if waiting for me to admire him. I laughed politely, unsure whether he was joking. But as the conversation progressed, it became increasingly clear that Henry wasn't someone who joked at his own expense, only at others. He spoke with a certain bravado, the kind that made it clear he thought highly of himself. He bragged about his high-paying job, about how women always swiped right on him, about how he had standards most women couldn't meet. He told me he had turned down a date last week because she didn't look as good in person as she did in her photos. Red flags. So many red flags. But I kept smiling, kept nodding, kept telling myself that maybe he was just nervous and overcompensating. Then the food arrived. Henry had ordered extravagantly: steak, lobster, a bottle of the restaurant's finest wine. Meanwhile, I had settled for something modest, not wanting to assume he'd be covering the bill. As we ate, he barely asked me anything about myself. Instead, he talked about his investments, his workout routine, his future empire. It was as if he saw me not as a person but as an audience. And then, as the meal neared its end, the check arrived. The waiter placed it neatly between us and walked away. I reached for my purse out of habit, but I paused, waiting to see what Henry would do. After all, he had chosen this restaurant. He had ordered the most expensive items. Surely he would at least offer. But Henry didn't even glance at the bill. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the last sip of wine in his glass, and smirked. "This is a test," he said smoothly. "A real wife should be willing to pay for her man." For a moment I thought he was joking. I let out a short laugh, waiting for the punchline. But his smirk remained, his expression expectant. He was serious. I stared at him, my stomach twisting with a mix of disbelief and irritation. Not because of the money, I could afford it. That wasn't the point. It was the audacity, the entitlement, the way he framed it as some kind of twisted test. I should have walked out right then. I should have left him there, forced him to cover his own extravagant meal. But something in me wanted to see how far he would take this. So I smiled, pulled out my card, and paid. Henry's smirk widened as if he had just won a game. "You passed," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. I clinked my glass against his and took a sip, masking my disgust. Then he had the nerve to lean in and say, "So when's date number 2? That was the moment I knew exactly who he was. A man who played games. A man who saw relationships as tests, as competitions where he always had to come out on top. A man who thought women had to prove their worth to him, but he never had to prove anything in return. I stood up, gathering my things. "I'll let you know," I said, voice light and playful. His grin deepened, clearly assuming he had won me over. But as I walked away, I blocked his number before I even reached the door. I didn't look back. That should have been the last time I ever saw him. It should have been nothing more than an amusing story I told my friends over drinks. A cautionary tale about the worst first date I had ever been on. But fate had other plans. Because years later, Henry would walk into another restaurant for another date. And this time he wouldn't be the one in control. As I walked away from that restaurant, blocking Henry's number before I even reached my car, I told myself I'd never think about him again. He was just another lesson. A cautionary tale, a reminder of the kind of man I would never tolerate. But lessons, even the harshest ones, shape us in ways we don't always realize in the moment. 4 months after that night, I found myself reflecting on the encounter, not because of Henry himself but because of what he represented. He was a type, a pattern I had seen before. A man who dangled approval like a prize, who treated relationships like a series of hoops a woman had to jump through. And as much as I wanted to believe he was an exception, the more I looked around, the more I saw variations of him everywhere. It wasn't just about one bad date. It was about how often women were expected to prove themselves while men simply existed, demanding admiration without effort. That realization settled into my bones, and rather than letting it make me bitter, I let it fuel me. I threw myself into my work with a new sense of purpose. As a relationship coach, I had always given advice, but now I wanted to go deeper. I started focusing on teaching women how to spot these red flags early, how to set boundaries before they found themselves entangled in a dynamic where they were always giving and never receiving. My sessions grew in popularity. Clients came to me with stories eerily similar to mine. Different men, different settings, but the same manipulative tactics. The more I worked with these women, the more I recognized the shift in myself. I had always been confident, but now I was unshakable. I no longer second-guessed my worth. No longer excused bad behavior under the guise of giving someone a chance. And with that clarity came a surprising side effect. I was no longer in a rush to find love. It wasn't that I had given up on relationships. I still believed in them, still wanted one eventually. But I was in no hurry. My life was full, my success growing, my peace intact. The idea of settling for a mediocre love just to fill a space felt laughable now. Ironically, that's when the universe decided to test me. One evening, after a particularly long day of back-to-back coaching calls, my best friend Claire called me, excitement practically crackling through the phone. "I found him," she declared. I frowned, kicking off my heels as I collapsed onto my couch. "Found who?" "The perfect guy for you," she said. "You've been working too much. You need to get out, meet people." "So, I set you up on a blind date." I groaned. "Claire." "Nope, don't fight me on this," she interrupted. "I know your type and I swear he checks all your boxes. He's successful, charming, and actually respects women. Just one date, that's all I'm asking." I sighed, rubbing my temples. I trusted Claire, she knew me better than anyone. And she wasn't wrong. I had been so focused on work that I hadn't given dating much thought in months. Maybe a low-stakes dinner with someone new wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. "Fine," I said. "One date." She squealed in delight and texted me the details before I could change my mind. The day of the date, I didn't feel nervous, just mildly curious. I had no expectations, no fantasies about what it could turn into. If it was good, great. If not, at least I'd have a nice meal. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early, scanning the room for any sign of my mystery date. The host led me to a quiet corner table and I settled into my seat, casually checking my phone. Then the door opened, and my blood turned to ice. "Henry." He strolled in, exuding that same confidence, that same smug self-assurance. My heart hammered, not from nerves but from sheer disbelief. What were the odds? He hadn't seen me yet. He was scanning the room, probably looking for the woman he thought he was about to impress. Then his gaze landed on me. And he froze. For the first time since I had met him, I saw something crack in his expression. Recognition. Confusion. A flicker of something that looked almost like unease. He hesitated for half a second before recovering, plastering on a grin as he walked toward me. Well, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Small world, huh?" I smiled, folding my hands neatly on the table. "It really is." He leaned back, studying me as if trying to piece together how this had happened. Did you set this up? I arched a brow. Why would I do that? His grin widened, but there was an edge to it now. Funny, I was actually looking forward to meeting my blind date tonight. I tilted my head. You still are. His smile faltered for a split second. This was different. The last time I had sat across from Henry, I had been polite, eager to give him the benefit of the doubt. Now I was a woman who knew exactly who she was dealing with. So, I said, casually picking up my menu. Tell me about yourself, Henry. What do you do for a living? He blinked as if thrown off by the sudden shift. I run my own business. I nodded. Impressive. And tell me, do you still believe women should prove themselves by paying for your extravagant meals? His jaw tightened. You remember that, huh? Oh, I never forget a good test. He laughed, but it was forced. Look, Abigail, I was younger then. I've grown since that night. I smiled. Good. Because I have too. The waiter arrived and Henry, perhaps eager to prove his growth, immediately waved him over. I'll take a Scotch neat, he said. Then glancing at me, order whatever you'd like. My treat. I bit back a smirk. Oh, this was going to be fun. The night was only just beginning. Henry's confidence was something to admire. Misplaced, inflated, but unwavering. As he signaled the waiter and proudly declared that he would be paying for dinner, I could see the silent performance unfolding. This wasn't about generosity. It was about control. About rewriting history. About convincing me and, more importantly, himself that he had changed. I leaned back in my chair, watching him as if I were the audience to a one-man show. He smirked, swirled his drink and leaned forward, eager to reclaim the dominance he believed he had lost. So, Abigail, he said, his voice carrying the same self-assured tone I remembered. What have you been up to all these years? Besides, missing me? I let out a soft chuckle, tilting my head slightly. Oh, just building my empire. His smirk twitched, momentarily caught off guard. Empire. I took a sip of my wine before setting the glass down. Yes. I run a relationship consultancy now. Helping women identify red flags, build their confidence, and ensure they don't waste their time on the wrong kind of men. The smile on Henry's face faltered just slightly, but he recovered quickly. Wow. So you turned dating into a business? More like a mission, I corrected, holding his gaze. You'd be surprised how many women out there have had experiences just like mine. His jaw tensed ever so slightly, but he forced a laugh. Come on, that was years ago. I was just messing around back then. I didn't really think you'd take it that seriously. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I didn't take it personally. But I did find it educational. He shifted in his chair, taking a quick sip of his drink. I could see the gears in his head turning. He was trying to gauge if this was still a flirtatious game, if he could still steer the conversation in his favor. So what's the biggest lesson you teach women? He asked, leaning in as if genuinely interested. I smiled, not missing the challenge in his tone. To never ignore the first red flag. For the first time that evening, his confidence wavered. Just a flicker, but it was there. A crack in the armor he had so carefully crafted. The waiter arrived, setting down our plates. Henry immediately dove into his steak, but I took my time watching him, waiting. I knew him now. I knew how men like him worked. The only question was, how far was he willing to go to prove himself? So, I continued, cutting a small piece of my food. Tell me, Henry. What's changed? He swallowed quickly, dabbing his mouth with the napkin. What do you mean? Well, I said, gesturing toward him, you seem eager to impress me tonight. And if I recall, the last time we sat across from each other, I was the one picking up the tab. So what's different now? His smile was tighter now, forced. I've grown up, Abigail. I'm not the same guy I was back then. I nodded slowly, setting down my fork. That's good to hear. So no more tests for the women you date. His laugh was strained. Come on, don't tell me you're still thinking about that. It was just a joke. Was it? I asked, tilting my head. Because I've spoken to a few women who've gone on dates with you since then. And, funnily enough, they all have similar stories. His entire body went still. For the first time, true tension crackled between us. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Would you like me to list their names? His hand tightened around his glass. I don't know what you're talking about. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as he struggled to maintain his composure. He had walked into this dinner believing he was in control. That I was just another woman who had fallen for his charm. He had no idea that I had been waiting for this moment. "Relax, Henry," I finally said, taking another sip of wine. "I'm not here to expose you." He exhaled slowly, forcing out a chuckle. "Good. Because you're making it sound like I'm some kind of villain." I smiled. "Are you?" His expression hardened for just a second before he laughed again, shaking his head. "You really haven't changed, have you?" "Oh, I've changed plenty," I said. "I just don't play games anymore." The conversation shifted after that. He tried to regain his footing, steering the discussion toward lighter topics, but I could see the difference in him now. The certainty, the cockiness, it had been shaken. When the bill arrived, he reached for it quickly, eager to prove something. "I've got this." I didn't stop him. I simply leaned back, watching as he pulled out his card. The waiter took it, nodded, and disappeared. Henry took a deep breath, flashing me a grin. "See? I told you I've changed." A beat passed. Then another. The waiter returned, holding the card. "I'm sorry, sir, but your payment didn't go through." The color drained from Henry's face. He blinked, then forced a laugh, reaching into his wallet. "That's weird. Try this one." The second card was declined. Then the third. His fingers clenched around his wallet, his eyes darting around the restaurant, panic creeping into his expression. He avoided my gaze, muttering something about a bank error. I sat there, silent, letting the weight of the moment settle around him. And then, just like he had done to me all those years ago, I leaned forward, smiling sweetly. "Don't worry, babe," I said, my voice dripping with amusement. "Okay. Consider it a charity donation." His jaw tensed, his entire body stiffening. He knew exactly what I was doing. I took my time, sliding my card toward the waiter who, bless him, bit back his own smirk. Henry swallowed hard, his hands tightening into fists beneath the table. "Abigail." I stood up, smoothing down my dress. "You know, Henry, I used to think of our first date as my worst experience. But now I think it was the best lesson I ever had." He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. I grabbed my purse, slipped a generous tip to the waiter, and turned to leave. As I reached the door, I pulled out my phone. Walked. This time I didn't even hesitate. As I stepped out of the restaurant, the night air felt crisp against my skin, as if the universe itself had exhaled alongside me. I had done what I needed to do, closed a chapter one never even realized had been left open. But something lingered, an unsettling feeling that Henry wasn't the type to take humiliation lightly. I didn't regret what I had done. Not for a second. If anything, I had given him a taste of the very test he had subjected so many women to. The difference? Mine wasn't a test to determine worth. It was a lesson to remind him that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Henry, we need to talk." I laughed under my breath, shaking my head. Predictable. He wouldn't let this go, not without trying to regain control, to flip the script. But I was no longer the woman he could toy with. I slid into my car, taking a deep breath before deciding to respond. Just once. "Me, there's nothing left to say. You finally got to experience what you put others through. How does it feel?" The typing bubbles appeared instantly, hesitated, then disappeared. I could picture him seething, scrambling for the perfect comeback, something that would knock me off balance. But I wasn't that girl anymore. That night I let it go. Or at least I thought I did. But the next morning my past found a way of catching up with me. I was in the middle of a client session when an email notification popped up on my laptop. The subject line made my stomach tighten. "You won't get away with this." I clicked it, already knowing who it was from. "Henry. Abigail, you think you're clever, don't you? You think you've won some kind of battle. But let me tell you something, you haven't. You embarrassed me, sure. But that's temporary. What you did was low. You think you're a relationship expert? That you're helping women? All you're doing is feeding them lies, making them think men like me are the enemy. But you know what? I'll make sure people see who you really are. I wouldn't be surprised if you start losing clients once they realize what kind of person you are. Let's see how confident you are when that empire of yours starts to crumble." I leaned back, staring at the screen, the heat in my chest shifting from anger to something far colder. Amusement. He still believed he had some kind of power over me. That he could shake me, intimidate me. But Henry didn't know who he was dealing with anymore. I closed the email, exhaled, and got back to my session. Because that was the thing about men like him. They thrived on reaction. And I wasn't about to give him one. But fate had other plans. 2 days later, Claire called, her voice thick with barely contained glee. "Oh my God, have you seen it?" I frowned, shifting my phone to my other ear. "Seen what?" He cackled. "Check your socials. You're going viral." I sat up straighter, unlocking my phone and opening the app. And there was a woman, a complete stranger, had posted a story about her experience with Henry. "So, I went on a date with this guy, Henry. He looked great on paper. Tall, charming, successful. But the minute we sat down, he told me he had a test to see if I was worth his time. And guess what? The test was me paying for everything while he sat there smirking like he was the prize." I left. But the best part? Apparently, this dude tried the same trick on a woman who is now a professional relationship coach, and SG got the ultimate payback. If you haven't seen her work, check out Abigail's content. We should all take notes. The post had thousands of shares. Comments flooded in, each one roasting Henry more than the last. Wait, is this the same Henry the first went out with? Because same story. This man really thought he was running an experiment and got experimented on. "Abigail, if you ever write a book, I'm buying 10 copies. I sat there, stunned. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't asked for this. But somehow my revenge had taken on a life of its own. And Henry? He was drowning in it. I knew it was only a matter of time before he reached out again. He wouldn't let this go, not without trying to salvage whatever was left of his reputation. Sure enough, later that night another email came through. This time the subject line read, "You need to fix this." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because for once Henry was the one scrambling, trying to pass a test he had never expected to take. I closed my laptop, feeling something I hadn't in a long time, complete and utter peace. Because the best revenge? It had already happened. And I hadn't even needed to lift a finger. The satisfaction of seeing Henry's reputation crumble was sweet, but the story wasn't over. I had closed my laptop that night feeling like the chapter was finally finished. I had moved on, left him behind, and let karma do its job. But men like Henry never go down quietly. The next morning I woke up to a string of missed calls from an unknown number. I knew who it was before I even checked my email. Sure enough, another message sat waiting for me. "Henry, you need to make this stop. You've taken things too far, Abigail." I smirked at the sheer irony of it. He thought I was the one responsible for the avalanche of women coming forward, for the viral post that had become its own storm. But the truth was, I had done nothing except let the world see him for who he truly was. I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say. But Henry wasn't done. Later that evening, as I wrapped up a consultation call, a knock echoed at my door. My stomach tightened. No one showed up at my place unannounced. My friends always texted first. A chill ran down my spine as I made my way to the peephole. It was Henry. I stepped back instinctively, heart pounding. How did he even know where I lived? He knocked again, firmer this time. "Abigail, I know you're home." His voice was tense, low, controlled, but there was an edge to it, something simmering beneath the surface. I didn't open the door. "You need to leave, Henry." Silence. Then a humorless chuckle. "So, you're just going to hide?" I gritted my teeth. "I'm not hiding. I just don't have anything to say to you." He let out a slow breath. "Look, I get it. You think this is funny, you think you won. But you don't understand what you've done. My job is on the line, Abigail. My family is asking questions. My friends won't even return my calls. This isn't just a joke anymore." I leaned against the door, arms crossed. "It was never a joke, Henry. It was your reality catching up to you." He scoffed. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think ruining my life makes you better than me?" I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. "I didn't ruin your life. You did that all on your own." Silence stretched between us again. When he spoke next, his voice was lower, almost pleading. I just need this to stop. Call off your little army. Tell them I'm not some villain." I sighed, pressing my fingers to my temple. "Henry, you're not the victim here. If women are speaking up, it's because they finally feel like they can. That has nothing to do with me. Maybe instead of blaming me, you should take a long, hard look at yourself." Pause. Then a muttered curse under his breath. I heard the shuffle of his shoes as he stepped back. "You're unbelievable." And just like that, his presence faded. I waited until I was sure he was gone before exhaling, my shoulders finally relaxing. I thought that was the end of it. I thought he would accept his fate and disappear from my life for good. But Henry had never been one to go down without a fight. The next day a post appeared online. A long-winded, self-pitying monologue about how a certain woman had orchestrated an entire campaign against him. How she had twisted his words, manipulated the truth, and encouraged women to fabricate stories about him. He didn't use my name, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. The comments were ruthless. "So now you're playing the victim? Dude, you literally did this to yourself." Gaslighting at its finest. Bro thought he was a mastermind but forgot karma exists. Henry had wanted sympathy, but he had miscalculated. Again. Women weren't just angry. They were tired. Tired of men like him. Tired of being told their experiences weren't real. Tired of being treated like they had to pass a test just to be valued. By the time I checked the post, it had already backfired spectacularly. His attempt at damage control had only made things worse. I could have responded. I could have written a long rebuttal, detailing every lie he had ever told, every woman he had ever played. But I didn't need to. Because this time I wasn't the one leading the charge. The world was handling it for me. A week later, Henry deleted his social media accounts. His name faded from conversations. The viral moment passed, as all things eventually do. And just like that, he was gone. I sat on my balcony one evening, sipping a glass of wine, letting the last remnants of the whole ordeal settle inside me. There was no victory dance, no gloating. Just a quiet sense of finality. I had never sought revenge. All I had wanted was to live my life, to move forward. But sometimes the best revenge wasn't about orchestrating someone's downfall. It was about standing so firmly in your truth that the world saw them for who they really were. And in the end, Henry had unraveled all on his own. Even after Henry disappeared from the online world, I expected some part of him to resurface, like a bad memory that refuses to fade completely. But days turned into weeks and then months, and there was nothing. No emails, no calls, no cryptic posts trying to rewrite the narrative. It was as if he had simply faded into irrelevance. And that, more than anything, was what I knew he wouldn't be able to stand. But I had long stopped worrying about him. My work was flourishing more than ever. The viral moment had brought in new clients, but more importantly, it had ignited a conversation that needed to happen. Women were more vocal about their experiences, more willing to call out behaviors they once dismissed as just how men are. It felt like progress. One afternoon, Claire and I sat at a small cafe, sipping iced lattes as the sun bathed the streets in gold. She was scrolling through her phone, pausing every so often to show me memes, when suddenly she froze. "Oh, my God," she whispered, eyes wide. I raised a brow. "What?" She turned her phone toward me. "It's Henry." I stiffened but forced myself to look. The post wasn't from him. It was from a local business networking page. The caption read, "From CEO to unemployed. When arrogance costs you everything." My stomach tightened. Claire clicked on the link, skimming quickly before glancing up at me. "He lost his job." I inhaled slowly, my fingers drumming lightly on the table. "Are you surprised?" She shook her head. "No, but it's worse than I thought. He didn't just lose his job, he lost everything. Turns out his company started investigating him after all the social media backlash. Clients dropped him. Investors backed out. They dug into his past, found some questionable practices, and cut ties. And get this, he tried to start over somewhere else, but his name is too well known now. Nobody wants to work with him." I exhaled, staring at the screen. I should have felt triumphant. This was, after all, the poetic justice so many had hoped for. But instead I just felt detached. Like I was reading about a stranger, someone I had once known in another life but no longer recognized. Claire nudged me. "Say something. This is exactly what he deserved." I nodded slowly, then took a sip of my drink. "It is." But there was a weight in my chest, something unexpected. Not regret, never that. But a realization. Henry had spent years believing he was untouchable. That his charm, his manipulation, his so-called tests made him superior. And now he had nothing. He had been tested in a way he never saw coming, and he had failed. Claire studied me, her expression softening. "Do you feel bad for him?" I shook my head. "No. But I do feel something." "Like what?" I hesitated. Like I just watched someone self-destruct in slow motion. And I didn't even have to do anything to push him there. He did it all on his own. Claire sighed, leaning back. Well, at least now you know it's really over. And I did. For the first time in a long time, I truly did. A week later, I received an email. Not from Henry. From his mother. I stared at the name in my inbox for a long time before clicking it. Abigail. I know you have no reason to hear me out and I don't expect a response. But I wanted to reach out woman to woman because I need you to understand something. I raised my son to be better than this. And I failed. I know what he did to you and to so many others. I've watched everything unfold. The stories, the consequences, the downfall. I can't excuse his behavior and I won't. But I will say this. He is paying the price now. More than you may ever know. And maybe he deserves it, but I'm still his mother. And it hurts to see your child destroy himself. I'm not asking for anything from you. I just needed you to know that he is not okay. And I don't know if he ever will be. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. This was not a letter begging for forgiveness. It wasn't an attempt to undo what had been done. It was just raw. And unexpectedly, it reached a part of me I hadn't even realized was still open. I never wrote back. But I did sit with it for a long time. People like Henry believed they were invincible until reality proved otherwise. He had been tested, but not by me, by life, by the very people he underestimated. And now, for the first time, he was facing a version of himself he couldn't escape. One afternoon months later, I walked by a small bookstore downtown and saw a familiar figure sitting at a corner table, staring at a cup of coffee like it held all the answers he had lost. Henry. He looked different. The sharp arrogance was gone, replaced by something more hollow, more uncertain. His suit was gone, replaced by simple jeans and a plain shirt. He looked normal. And for a moment, just a moment, our eyes met through the glass. I expected something, anger, resentment, maybe even an attempt to regain control. But there was nothing. Just a quiet understanding. He didn't wave. Didn't smirk. Didn't try to talk to me. He just nodded. I nodded back. And then I walked away. Because this time I knew he wouldn't follow. And that was all the closure I ever needed.